please.
Never miss our updates and be part of our conversation squad.
Abdi, am I live?
Live now.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunday morning Manthan talk. Today we have a very special speaker. As you know, we have been running a series of talks on the 50th anniversary of the emergence of Bangladesh. Today we have Mr. Mahfuz Anam, who will talk about whether Bangladesh faces a dilemma between democracy and development. Mr. Anam is a very distinguished journalist and public intellectual from Bangladesh. He was the founder, editor of, and continues to be the editor of Daily Star, one of the most well-known English language publications from Bangladesh. He's also the founder, editor of Bangla Daily, Pratham Holo, which is the largest circulated Bangla Daily in the country. Now, something very important for this occasion, Mr. Anam was a freedom fighter during Bangladesh's liberation war in '71, and he was a commissioned officer cadet in the Bangladesh Army. After that, he worked for the UNESCO around the world for about 13 years before returning to Bangladesh to set up these two media publications. Mr. Anam, as I said, is a very well-known public intellectual from Bangladesh, and he has a variety of interests, including human rights, journalism, etc. He is now the chairman of the, a president of the Editors Council of Bangladesh, and he's also a member of many international organizations dealing with journalism, including the International Press Institute, where he's currently the vice chairman. Mr. Anam, good morning and welcome to Manthan. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, yeah.
It's a great honor for me to be able to be a part of the Manthan process. And of course, it is also a great pleasure for me to talk about Bangladesh, of which, as you said, I was a freedom fighter. My being a freedom fighter has given me a personal exposure to the involvement of the Indian people, the Indian government, and of course the Indian army in our liberation struggle. So I really would like to begin by expressing not only a sense of thanks from all the freedom fighters and the people of Bangladesh, but on a personal behalf, because I'm a witness to the hospitality, the warmth, the sincerity with which people of India supported our struggle. Bangladesh, as many of you may know, that it was a very trying experience living within Pakistan, in the birth of which people of, let's say, at that time, East Pakistan made a lot of contribution. But within 2-3 years of our being a part of Pakistan, the disillusionment set in, and over the 23 years that we were part of Pakistan, we gradually verged on to our own self-realization, and led by our own very great leader, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, whom we lovingly call Bangabandhu. But anyway, starting with the Bangladesh story, I would like to sort of divide it into two trends, the democracy trend and the development trend. To put it journalistically, at this juncture of 50 years, I would say that the development curve is really on the rise. The democracy curve, unfortunately, is taking a dip. That's, if you like, the overall sketch of what I'm going to say today. On the democracy journey, we began very well. The 19th, after the liberation, the return of Bangabandhu to Bangladesh, the 1973 Constitution, I think, is one of the finest documents that of a liberal democratic state structure. However, the first few years of our experience, particularly the challenges of rebuilding a war-torn economy, really absorbed our full attention. And at that stage, the murder of the founder of the state, along with his whole family, was a tremendous setback, not only politically, structurally, but emotionally, psychologically. The man who was so much a part of our dream to have been so brutally dealt with. To put it very bluntly, what Pakistanis didn't do to Sheikh Mujib, tragically, a delusional section of our own army did it to our leader. And then that began a 16-year of military and quasi-military rule, which, if you like, was the second disappointment, because one of our fundamental pillars of liberation was democracy, and also the very, very strong desire not to replicate Pakistan, which was a story of military dictatorships in their own country. So first, the demise of the founder of the state and the usurpation of power by the military was really a very devastating experience for us, and against whom the struggle was on, particularly demonstrations and political struggle, and we finally got rid of the military and quasi-military dictatorship in 91. So in a way, though we got liberated in 71 and we had first 3.5 years of representative rule, we really began our democratic journey, or that I called in one of my columns as a rebirth of our democracy, which starts from 91. So really the story of both democracy and development actually starts from 1991 onwards, which is, if you like, now a 30-year story. From 91, we got back to democracy, representative government, and we also moved away from the presidential structure, which was the pattern of the military dictators. We came back to parliamentary democracy. So, and since 1991, we have had regular elections, and if you like, the consequence of that. Now, in this journey, the 91 to say 2021 can be divided into two phases. One is the phase of elections under caretaker government, and then which is up to 2008. So 1991 to 2008, we had regular elections under a system that we devised ourselves. Interestingly, actually proposed by the present Prime Minister and the ruling party, the caretaker government system. So we had elections under that from 91 to 2008. And then after the elections after 2008, which is like 2000, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 14, 19, these two elections have been under political party government, not the caretaker model. And now, in fact, that has been abolished. So that's interesting point to keep in mind, that the provision of the caretaker government, which was not introduced, but it was insisted upon and brought in by Awami League led by Sheikh Hasina. When she was in power, she came to power in 2008. In 2011, she abolished the caretaker government and brought it under the party system which you have in India. So this journey from 91 to 2021, the first phase, as I said, is from 91 to 2008. Now, this phase we saw, if you like, a swing of power between the ruling party and the opposition. So in 91, we got the PNP elected for 5 years. Then in 96, Awami League came to power. Then 2001, PNP again came back to power. And then 2008, Awami League came back to power. The reason for this 2001 to 2008, there was a 2-year military-backed caretaker government. So there was a bit of an aberration in this, if you like, continuum of elections. But the long and short of it was they were under caretaker government, and the pattern was that the ruling party always got defeated. So there was some merit to this and some demerit. The merit was that the ruling party had, in a sense, a taste of their own failure at the polls. So 5 years of rule, the ruling party got thrown out. The new party came in power and they got thrown out in the next 5 years. And this went on for 2 terms for each BNP and Awami League. So in a way, one could say that the voters really had a very strong say on which party is going to rule. It reflected, in a sense, the failure of the performance of the ruling party. It gave the sense of empowerment to the voters that we can, through our vote, change governments. So, which led to its consequent psychological framework that the party in power didn't really feel that they are the owners of everything. They knew that they could be thrown out. So that brought in some sort of an accountability, transparency. So these were, if you like, the good sides of the caretaker structured election. The bad side was that it began to politicize the judiciary, because the caretaker government was led by the last retired Chief Justice of Bangladesh. So who would be the last retired Chief Justice became a major, if you like, target of the political parties, and what was his political tendency became a matter of great concern. So the judiciary unwittingly or not unwillingly and began to be dragged into politics. And a manifestation of that was that when BNP was in power in 2001 to 2006, they suddenly extended the retirement age of the judges, which was purely motivated by the fact that given a 3-year extension, a certain other chief justice would be the caretaker chief rather than which would have flowed normally. So as you can see, the caretaker structure was dragging the judiciary into politics, which was not desirable. The other thing was that the tremendous, if you like, misuse of what I would say the democratic freedoms. The opposition parties continuously called for strikes. In Bangladesh, it is popularly called hartals, which used to be maybe 1, 2, 3 days and then end up for the whole week. So tremendous disruption of the economy. The parliament really became in a place rather of debate, it became a place of disruption. The opposition party would start off by walking out for a few hours, leading to boycott for a few days, and finally resignation from the parliament itself. So it was, I think, a very sad case of abusing and the freedoms and the courtesies which a parliamentary democratic system deserved. The notion that the parliament is the center of debate, center of nation building activities, center of vision, center of discussion, center of even dissension, ultimately became so partisan based that nothing that the government did, nothing that, according to the opposition, the government could do nothing. And according to the ruling party, the opposition really had nothing sensible to say. So it was really moving towards what should I say, distancing of the two major political parties, starting from being political rivals to becoming political competitors, finally ending up as enemies, and making the parliamentary system totally dysfunctional. Now, after 2008, when Sheikh Hasina returned to power, she abolished the caretaker system in 2011. And one of the direct results of it is that she has been re-elected for the three continuous terms. So when she finishes her term in 2020, I think 24 or 23, when we will have next election, she will have been in power for continuous 15 years. Now, that again is a first for Bangladesh. So while we had a misuse of, if you like, democratic freedoms in the first phase that I mentioned, 1991 to 2008, we now have an example of, if you like, continuum in a party in power, but leading to the abuses that we see, perhaps giving a fresh meaning to Lord Acton's saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the elections that have been held under the ruling party has raised a lot of questions. The whole voting process if now faces a lot of question. So, and also we have seen in the last 15 years, not 15 years, 13 years, enactment of laws that are clearly anti-freedom of speech, anti-freedom of assembly, particularly epitomized by a law called the Digital Security Act, which really has run amok, I would say, and led to all sorts of abuses and preventions of freedom of speech and freedom of the media. The other thing that has occurred, that in the first phase, 1991 to 2008, where Parliament, in a sense, was not constructive, but it was the center of rivalries between the opposition and the government. It didn't produce too much of constructive debate, but it did seem like a place where the opposition and the government criticized each other, some sort of a, if you like, center of activity. But in the second phase, from 2008 to the present, we see a gradual diminishing of the role of the parliament. There is hardly anything called opposition. There was a time when I don't think it is there now, but there was a time in the last government where the opposition party, which was the party of General Ershad, it was officially the opposition party, and yet three of their MPs were ministers in the cabinet. So I don't think world ever saw in a parliamentary structure where the party of the opposition also formed part of the ruling party with three cabinet posts. So these sort of hybrid situations and anomalies have occurred, and now there is virtually, you can say, almost very, very minimal presence of the opposition in the parliament. And also the ruling party's MPs hardly raise any fundamental questions The debates are mere formalities. And if I may put it bluntly, that we really haven't seen important national issues being discussed on the floor of the parliament. So parliament has, in a way, become a sideshow. Judiciary, through the process of appointment by the executive branch, has become, if you like, much more muted. Statutory bodies that we have, like Anti-Corruption Commission, Information Commission, Human Rights Commission, hardly function in the way that the Constitution actually envisaged. So we are now in a political sort of structure of what is internationally known as hybrid democracy and authoritarian, a mixture of democratic norms and authoritarianism, and elections really losing its power of giving a ruling party the right sort of messages. The media is tremendously under pressure. There's a lot of self-censorship in the media. So these are, if you like, the present state of what we have as a part of our democratic journey. But there is the other story, and which is really where the dilemma begins. Under Sheikh Hasina's continuous rule for last 13 years, of course, the roots of it go far back, but its most dramatic manifestation has occurred under Sheikh Hasina's government, which is our development story. Now, just to give you some figures, I mean, our GDP growth at birth in 1970 was 2% or something like that. But over the last 2 decades, almost 2 decades, 20 years, we have had an average GDP growth of 6%. Even under the COVID, our growth was 5.4% when most of the global economies performed much poorer than compared to Bangladesh. In 1973, our per capita income was $120. Now it is $2,200. Our take, for example, food production. At birth, we were a famine-stricken country of 75 million people. Now we are 160 million, more than double the population at birth. And we are almost self-sufficient in our food production. Our life expectancy was 45 in 1972, now it is 73 today. So all the social indicators and the economic indicators have really given us a tremendous sense of success, which is, I would like to really emphasize to the Manthan audience that the story of success is far more important for us than perhaps in the case of many other countries, because we were so much dubbed as a quote unquote unsuccessful experiment. I mean, people express so much doubt on the viability of the state of Bangladesh. We were, a natural disaster prone country. We were a country of huge population with a limited land space. We were a country of a huge burden of illiteracy and poverty. So the image was, or even expectations from friendly countries was, that we will be a country constantly in need of being helped. We are a country that depend on foreign aid and holding hands, if you like. That would be our pattern. For that country to become a model of development, a source of inspiration for many, to become a country that is now attracting global attention, is a matter of great psychological impact for a citizen of Bangladesh. I mean, from a if you like, a sense of always being depressed or always being looked down upon as not very successful, to an image of can do is a major transformational phenomena, psychologically, emotionally. So I would like to sort of briefly mention that what are the few elements where Bangladesh really made that transition, and why have we come, or how have we come where we are today? I would like to quote from a very eminent economist of Bangladesh, Mr. Hussein Zillur Rahman. He has identified what he calls 5 transformational phenomena, and I fully agree with that, and that's why I'm quoting him. According to him, the first transformation was Bangladesh becoming a disaster victim country to a disaster manager country. And this is, believe me, is a major success. Countries that do not face natural calamities on a regular basis, and the calamities being very, very devastating in nature, flood and cyclone being the two, which really devastated Bangladesh all through our early history. Now, through our own effort, through our growing expertise, through learning from other countries, we are now a good manager of natural disaster. This in turn means that we are well prepared to face them. We are capable of handling them in a way that the disastrous impacts are minimized, people's dislocation, both their personal life and their economic life, being well managed. This is a major shift, that we are now being able to manage our natural disasters in a way which is both dignified and competent. Second transformational difference is production of food. Now, we were a famine-stricken country, as I said, of 75 million. Now we are almost self-sufficient in terms of food production, a country of 160 million. This has come about by a most impressive embracing of technology by our mostly illiterate farmers. There have been a very constructive and wise policy support in the forms of fertilizer supply, subsidy to fertilizer, and tax regime, which has been very, if you like, supportive of the transformation in agriculture. So this is the second phenomenon. The third phenomena is our integration with the world economy, which in our case is not so much with our export earning, which is also very good, but in 2 other areas. One is the remittance. Now, remittance is, if you like, a phenomenal force of progress, particularly in the rural areas. We get about, I think, $30+ billion a year from remittance, and this money, not so much the amount of money, but the fact that this money goes directly to the villages. So imagine a laborer who is working outside sends the money to their family in the village. So it's a money transfer that from a foreign source is transferred to the village, adding to the village economy, adding to the purchasing power of the rural people. Now, this, I think, had a tremendous impact, something that is quite immeasurable. Number one, the supply of the foreign exchange, and number two, it's actually destination, which are the people at the very end of the, if you like, the chain. And this is transformed now quite unbelievably with the coming of electricity, and now with the availability of internet. Our villages have really become quite stunning. When I go to my own village, my farmer neighbors using the television, having a fridge, and also some of them are using laptops is quite a sight. So this is number 3, and the integration of the global economy. So one was the remittance, the other is our RNG sector, the ready-made garment sector, in which we are number 2, just behind China. And that also has generated a lot of activity in the economy, the backward linkages from the RMG that goes, to many other sectors, employment, and all that. And so these two things have led to the 4th transformational phenomena, which is the emergence of women in our economy and social activities. So as you know, that almost 95% or near about employment in the garment is women. Now, this employment of women in the garment has a phenomenal impact, because it is not only the money that the woman is earning, it is her sense of empowerment, sense of involvement, and the cultural impact that it has, that many husbands now value their wives much more than they did before, because they are earning money, sometimes more than the husband. Sometimes the husband is unemployed and she's the only bread earner in the family. So this transformation has empowered women. They have brought them into more recognition of their role in the economy. So integration with the global economy and emergence of women being number 4, and something that I mentioned in passing is the bringing of the rural areas into, if in a way, sort of a part of the total economy. I mean, one can put it that while the villages were remote places before, now they're a continuum. Instead of rural urban divide, you now have a rural urban continuum in terms of the economy brought in through this technology. So these are, if you like, 5 major transformational phenomena that has happened in our. So this brings us to the dilemma that is that is what I want to talk about. That on the one hand, the economic success, on the other hand, the democratic journey now brings us to the question of future. How are we going to go into the future with our prospect of becoming a developing country? Now, the fundamental, if you like, challenge from a least developed country or from a lower middle income country to a middle income country, the challenge is that many of the, if you like, concessional credits that we used to enjoy, the duty-free access to international markets that we enjoyed, which played a very important role in our economic transformation, these are not likely to be there in the future. So how does Bangladesh now go into the future, which we are calling here as graduating into the next stage of global economy? How do we prepare for that? Because we were a country heavily subsidized. We had duty-free access to international market. So all these things helped us. But in the future, we will have to compete practically on equal terms. We may have some concessions somewhere, but the whole paradigm is being globally competitive. So how do we go into that? So here, the dilemma that I want to point out is that those who believe in, if you like, a fast-moving development scenario, they say that democracy is a bit messy, decision-making is long, there is a lot of bureaucratic tangles that we have to deal with, and very importantly, that in a democracy, because you need to, if you like, negotiate through a whole range of vested interests or group interests, the ultimate decision of the government may not be the best one, because there are a lot of there is a need for compromise within the democratic process. You need to look at the constituencies. You'll have to look at your future voting banks and make decisions which are perhaps good for your vote but may not be good for the economy. So this sort of a paradigm that democracy in a way imposes on the economy is not the best one for a country which has a lot of development challenges and needs to move fast. So we need quick decisions. Sometimes the decisions are, if you like, hurting this section or the other. Tough decisions, sometimes austerity decisions, which are not very welcome. This can be taken in a framework where democratic freedoms are trimmed or even held in abeyance for a while. And examples of South Korea is cited very often, Taiwan is cited as well. And of course, the present day China, which really has no democracy, but a lot of development to their credit. The democracy debate, on the other hand, is that, listen, if you are going to take away the freedom just for the development, then this freedom this development will not be owned by the people. This developmental pattern may be pushed upon the people, which may not produce the best result. And of course, this pattern of democracy, this pattern of development leads to non-accountability, leads to corruption, leads to arbitrariness, leads to a development of vested interest that become aligned with the political party, whose powerful figures then become actors in policy formulation that are not perhaps most desirable. And this is really where we are at the moment. And if I may quote some very eminent economists of Bangladesh, Professor Rahman Subhan, he's well known in India, a great friend of Amartya Sen, and highly respected figure in Bangladesh. He recently, in a speech, said that in spite of Bangladesh's enormous progress in economic and social progress in the last 50 years, it has failed to institutionalize democracy, improve governance, and protect the environment. He also said, we also see a widening of social and economic inequality and weakening of institutions. There exists a politically patronized bureaucracy and exclusionary political space. So you are talking about politically patronized bureaucracy, you are talking about democracy not being institutionalized, and a weakening of institutions and a widening of social and economic inequality. Another very eminent scholar here, Professor Raunak Jahan, she made a comment that democracy cannot be restored unless we can stop money making as the objective of politics. We have a very world famous environmentalist. His name is Selimul Haq. He's really a core part of the whole COP process globally. He said, we are proud of what Bangladesh has achieved, but not the way we have destroyed our forests, wetlands, coastal zones, and rivers. So this has given us, if you like, given rise to the future direction, that yes, we have had development, but it has caused inequality, it has caused devastation of the environment, it has caused patronized bureaucracy to emerge. It has really, the cronyism in Bangladesh today is quite as strong as in many other countries. So can that be the way forward? My conclusion is that absolutely not. This democracy versus development debate, in my view, is an artificial debate. Actually, the real sense of direction is democracy and development, because we are seeing in Bangladesh, and Bangladesh can become like a model for growth without, freedom, not without freedom, but growth with very limited freedom, growth with the destruction of the environment, growth with highly concentration of wealth in a minority group, a development that is not really promoted through a discussion with the people. Take, for example, issues like use of coal as a generation of power, issues like Bangladesh going nuclear for source of power. These are very, very, if you like, historic and long-term issues, but they have been adopted without too much of discussion in the public domain, particularly our going for nuclear power as a source. Maybe that's the best option, but it has really not gone through the debate and the public participation process that is the precondition for sustainable development. Finally, I would like to conclude by saying, by quoting a famous book, which I'm sure many of you must have read, if not all. It's called Why Nations Fail. It is a book written by two very famous authors. One is Asimoglu and another is Robinson. This book is about, I think, 7-8 year old, but they make a very, very, I would say, phenomenal discovery through their research. And I think they have made a suggestion which I hold very, very firmly to, that, countries that build institutions and go through the process of development, those developments sustain themselves. They're sustainable development only if it is economic development followed through with institutional development. But the countries that develop in a way for many, reasons for the moment, without building institution, the economic development of those countries do not sustain, and they fall into disarray after a very successful period. And what is economically called the middle income trap of countries, and you see Brazil as an example, you see South Africa an example, you see Philippines as an example. These were at one stage really global examples of how move forward. But look at Brazil, it has really not moved. It has fallen in what is called the middle income trap, and it is now stuck there for, I think, more than 25-30 years. Same is the case with the Philippines. Nothing much has happened. South Africa is another country. So Bangladesh has to learn from these countries, and the lesson is fundamentally is that you have to build institutions of the economy, like banks, regulatory framework, a very transparent and accountable budgetary process. So these are the institutions of the economy, and then you have to build the institutions of democracy, fundamental of which is parliament. A very credible election. Then monitoring mechanisms, and then open public debate, space for civil society, and definitely space for the media. So my concluding remark is that Bangladesh has come a long way, has made tremendous success. It is really a model for development for many parts of the world. But in our future journey, we need to incorporate a lot of democratic elements in our developmental journey, and only then it will be sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Anam. It's been a very illuminating lecture, and I think you have captured the dilemmas fairly accurately. And I'm sure that many of us in India are going through the same debates. But there are many questions here, and the first question I would like to ask is Is there a trend now in Bangladesh towards non-secular politics?
Well, again, I would answer it at two levels. One is that at the governmental level, there is a tremendous commitment to values of secularism, which is really our value of liberation war and our constitution. And Sheikh Hasina's government can be credited with firmly trying to follow this. But there is a tendency, I think, revival of religion, intolerance in certain sections, and I would say failure on the part of the civil society and the government of being able to actually reach out to the people and convince them of the superiority of the secular culture rather than a religion-based, view of the world. There, I think we have not succeeded. If I may make a personal, anecdote here, that I remember very distinctly. I was in a Mukti Bahini camp in India on 16th of December, in a camp called Murti, which is in West Bengal, towards the northern West Bengal near Shiliguri. We were 70 of us Bangladeshi, officer cadet, and when the instrument of surrender was signed in Dhaka, we were all listening to it on a one-band radio. And when the signature took place, we all shouted "Joy Bangla," and I remember feeling very strongly that never again in independent Bangladesh will anybody be victimized because of his or her ethnicity or religion. But 50 years from that day, I will have to admit that that dream of mine remains unfulfilled.
Mr. Anam, somewhat on the same issue, you spoke in the beginning about a weakening of democratic institutions, whether parliament or anti-corruption or human rights commission. It is eerily similar, as you know, to what we are experiencing here. Also similar is a weakening of the opposition. Now, how do you see a strengthening of these institutions? Because if there's one party effectively in power, which does not always respect the opposition, if institutions have been captured, how does one roll it back? How does one strengthen those institutions so that we can escape from the dilemma that you posed?
This is an answer to this question is beyond my intellectual ability, but it is a desire, common desire of I think people everywhere who wants. I personally, as a journalist, I have decided that my role would be to remain committed to ethical journalism, to remain as much possible to people's rights and wishes and people's demands, and face the consequences that may come my way. But so that is my, if you like, decision, that I have to retain the values for which Bangladesh was born and the values of my profession. Now, if I extrapolate from there and say that, listen, if we each of us, in a sense, make it a personal struggle of maintaining those values and ethics in our own personal life and professional life, then perhaps a group or some I don't know, process of change may come about. Because I would like to term what is happening like rise of religion-based politics and religion-based view of the world. It is a global phenomenon. I mean, it is in India, Bangladesh, in many other countries, and we just need to put our heads together and try and find a way forward. But unfortunately, I'm not wise enough to give you a formula for future.
Yeah.
No, but then there is one more institution. We should talk about the institution to which you belong to, the freedom of press.
Yes.
How do you find that being curtailed in Bangladesh? You think you are as free as what you were 15 years ago, 30 years ago, or what's happening there?
No, it is really, I would say, in a disastrous state. There's absolute intolerance for alternative views. The culture is one of not only not allowing the dissent, but denigrating the dissent, demonizing the dissent. Very easily. That since you say, for example, if I write a strong report of a particular development project, which has many flaws, then my report is not seen on the merit of the facts that I have put, but they'll say, oh, this paper or this man he does not want development. So criticizing a project, which is for the good of the project, is then termed as not wanting development. And therefore you are, if not an enemy, but definitely you are not a friend of the future, of the growth that we are imagining. So A, not permitting dissent, B, demonizing the dissent, and then C, personally harassing institutions and individuals who may master the courage of saying something through various laws. And the most nefarious of it is the Digital Security Act, which gives so much power to the police, arbitrary power to the police, to arrest and to lodge a case. Then there is also a total, if you like, misuse of the law for defamation. Now, defamation law clearly says that only the person who is defamed has the right to go for a defamation case. But here, totally different people. Like suppose we have written about a political leader whom we have criticized. That leader doesn't do anything. His supporter in various districts lodges several cases. What is the thing? What is the reason? I have felt defamed because my leader was defamed. Now, the law doesn't allow such cases. And unfortunately, the judiciary, the lower judiciary, accepts those cases. It is clearly written, A, that only the aggrieved person, and B, there can't be one case, can't be more than one case for the same crime. So you have anybody making a case of defamation against a journalist, and then same incident is being accepted in multiple courts of the various districts. So media, I must say, that is in a very dire situation, and it is being demonized. Anything a dissenting view is being demonized, and we are now into a phase, now into a phenomenon of self-censorship, a severe level of self-censorship.
Mr. Anam, just have to say that this, as I said, very similar to what we are experiencing here in the media. We don't have to tell you that the defamation. I just wanted to ask you whether you have something called the Sedition Law in Bangladesh as well, where opponents are frequently charged with a colonial law, but that remains on the statutes of Bangladesh, because that is frequently used here to kind of stifle opposition and to throw people in jail.
We have the law here, but it is not very frequently used, because you have other laws which are just as good and more modern.
Turning to the economic area, you talked about the transformation. You see two factors you pointed out. One was remittances, which you highlighted. The second is the RMG sector, which of course Bangladesh is now second, and much to India's embarrassment, India has fallen far behind. But the question looking at the future is this placing too much emphasis on two eggs in the basket? That yes, remittances, as for example, has served India also well for more than almost 30 years. And we hope that it would serve Bangladesh as well in future. But is there any process of diversification going on? And has that been successful?
I would put it this way, that our policymakers are very much aware of these, the vulnerability of basing the whole economy on one or two or three pillars. We have had a, if you like, good innings with such dependence, but this will not last, and we need to prepare. So I cannot cite an example of where the preparation has been very successful, but their preparation is very much on diversification, export promotion, introduction of new technology, and this whole process of diversification of our export items. That's why we are really looking forward to a lot of foreign direct investment, which unfortunately has not been very forthcoming. And this is where regulatory issues come in, the laws, the implementation of the laws, the cronyism. I don't think we have been able to sufficiently build confidence in foreign investors to come in a big way to Bangladesh. That remains a major challenge.
No, but on that question, I think a collateral question to that is the influence of China on Bangladesh. Mm-hmm. We see a growing investment interest from China, it may be in the form of additional debt, aid, or whatever it is. How do you see that interest of China in the context of democracy?
Well, let's say from Bangladesh's point of view, we need capital. And so China is a big source of capital. It is also a big source of technology. And many of the major projects in Bangladesh, Chinese credit is playing a part, Chinese engineering and technology, where we are keeping a very close watch. And I think here we do deserve a bit of a pat on the back, is not to fall into the trap that Chinese credit sometimes poses. Sri Lanka being a good example in the neighborhood, and many of the African countries. So we keep a very, very, very close watch on how much we are borrowing from China. But the fact that we are borrowing and we need that borrowing, I know we are aware, or at least I am aware as an editor, that this sometimes puts India in an uncomfortable position. And then you are not very happy with our perhaps growing relationship with China. But please see it from Bangladesh's perspective. We need the investment. We are also welcoming Indian investment in Bangladesh, and we are looking forward to it. So there will be, if you like, close relationship between China and Bangladesh, but a more closer relationship with Bangladesh and India, which we are forging ahead. But China will be a part of our scene, but we will not allow it to determine either our foreign policy or our domestic policy. We'll try our best not to.
Mr. Anam, there's a question here from the audience. This is something that you would be familiar with, often asked in political discourse in India, in the media. It was even asked last week, but I will still ask you today. That this is from the northeast of India, that we are obsessed about, permit me to use this term, illegal migrants from Bangladesh. We would like to know your views on the subject. If I can add to that, what is your perception, what is Bangladesh's public opinion about this whole issue of migration from Bangladesh to India? Was it there earlier, which has subsided? Is it still continuing? Is it mainly to Assam and other areas, or it is really something that politics in India has made a big issue of?
Now, I think there's an element of all of these in the discussion. I mean, Bangladesh tendency here is to totally deny that it's at all happening. So no, this is not true and all that, which I don't believe should be the right approach. But it is also true that it is being highly exaggerated on the other side and made it out to be the biggest enemy of their future and things like that, which to me is a tactics for diverting political debate from other issues. So we are on our side, we are on a denial mode. On your side, or at least Northeast, you are on a vehemently exaggerating mode, and the real solution-based discussion is really not on the agenda.
Maybe one more question here, and I would like to elaborate on this, that the absence of inner party democracy within the ruling party itself is also a reason where we have cronyism, we have business houses investing in politics or in the political future of the state. Do you see that as an increasing trend, that business houses are being involved?
Very much, very much. There is, in the democracy story that I narrated, I forgot to mention that both in BNP, which is led by Khaleda Zia, wife of General Zia Rahman, and in the Awami League led by Sheikh Hasina, there is very little called inner party democracy. The leaders in the second, third, and fourth tier absolutely are beholden to the top leader, and because of being beholden, they don't have independent base of politics, and they serve at the whim of the leader. I think this is something that you probably didn't have in India before, but it is now creeping in or marching in, whichever you want to say. That's one. And it really I see no sign of it decreasing in Bangladesh at the moment. The role of the leader and all the other being basically beholden to her for their future. So this, and then you see, I would like to take a point that something else is happening in our part of the world. It has happened in Bangladesh, and I think it is happening in India. Pakistan, I don't know much about. That, in the democratic framework, you have distribution of power and the system of check and balance between the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. So there are powers belonging to executive, which are overseen by the judiciary, definitely discussed in the parliament, and there are areas in which the executive branch can rein in the legislative, and of course judiciary being a part of the whole process. Now, in many countries, and definitely in Bangladesh, this scheme of check and balance is now totally absent. In this triangular power sharing of judiciary, executive, and the legislative, executive branch has grown enormously. And because of its majority in the parliament and now total absence of opposition in the parliament, the executive branch is in control of the legislative branch. And through form of appointment, it has tremendous influence on the judiciary. So ultimately what has happened is that there is no power sharing. There is the emergence of the executive branch, which is then headed by one party, which is now, that party is in the total control of one leader. So ultimately, if you like, the state power has emerged in a way that is where the division of power and check and balance is almost totally absent.
Mr. Anam, sometimes we don't know whether you're talking about India or Bangladesh.
I don't want to say.
There's a
actually, I want to say, Anam, why don't you talk about Bangladesh? Don't talk about
India. Different question on a different matter from Ms. Bizet Banerjee. She asks, since women have been economically empowered and at the same time there is growing fundamentalism in Bangladesh, how will the expected conflicts play out, between the status of women and the rising fundamentalism?
I think this is really a case in progress. I think Bangladesh will make a good example of the question that you asked, that how does it play out? Because Bangladesh's economic development could not have at all been achieved without the empowerment of women. So for our own future developmental needs, women would have to be an integrated part of the economic process. But on the other hand, the rising fundamentalism do pose a lot of restriction on women. So it is something that we'll see how it plays out. At the moment, it's a work in progress. I think there's a tremendous undercurrent of tension between these two forces so far. And here again, I would like to give a lot of credit to Sheikh Hasina and her government, that has been very, very clearly and decisively on the side of women's empowerment. Therefore, in this, if you like, transition and tension, the whole power of the executive branch has been in favor of the woman. Now, if the executive branch ideologically shifts, what will happen to this tussle is something, I think there is a sense of discomfort in people like me.
Question from Varun Mitra. He asks, Bangladesh had a relatively smooth democratic transition from 1990 to 2010, and the foundation of the socio-economic development were largely laid during the phase of competitive politics. But politically, things have deteriorated in the past 10 years. So should we be apprehensive of the economic fallout of political dominance?
Okay, now here, theoretically, what you say looks correct, but practically, in the last 10 years, the economic growth has been phenomenal. So yes, in the phase of competitive politics, we have had economic growth, but in the phase of non-competitive politics, we've had phenomenal growth. Now that is what my talk was about. The tendency to justify this second phase, to say that this has happened because of the absence of competitive politics, because of the absence of contestation, because the government was not distracted, it was able to take decisive steps and give support to the economy, give incentive to people who deserved it, make the right policies, regardless of what others thought. So that's the crux of the dilemma. As I said in my conclusion, I do not believe that this phenomenon will continue unless we bring in the democracy notions into flow.
There's a question actually two questions by Pallav Bhattacharya. One is, they're kind of related. One is the communal flare-ups that you now see occasionally in Bangladesh. Are they an expression of the opposition being out of power for a long period, or are there other reasons? The second question that he asks is that how does Bangladesh see the migrant influx from Myanmar?
Well, let me start with the second, which is easier to answer. That obviously we see it as a tremendous threat to our stability, and also threat to, in a way, economy, because it is very difficult for a country which is resource constrained like ours to carry on, looking after these 1 million people. This is one aspect. The other is definitely security aspect, because these people are in many ways totally illiterate. I am perhaps exaggerating, but their literacy levels are only in their own native tongue. The Myanmaris didn't allow them to be a part of the educational system of Myanmar in general. So their worldview, openness to technology, openness to education is very, very limited. Most of them really know only Arabic or to read the rudimentary levels of the Holy Quran and others. Beyond that, they really have nothing. So for us to handle that, we are really in a dilemma, and we see no prospect of a solution, particularly after the military takeover. So in a sense, you can say we are really in a huge intellectual and economic challenge. This is on this side. But on the question of the fundamentalist forces, I think one new element will have to be added to the understanding of this: the use of technology. Now, say what's happening in all the instances. The recent event that the Muslim holy book was placed in a idol, which then was live live broadcast through Facebook Live, and its spread was phenomenal, which is something we never had before. And if somebody orchestrates it, that I'm going to, this later turned out to be a totally contrived incident where a man took the holy book and placed it there. It was totally contrived, and then made to see through the Facebook Live. And if you have, if you constructed that, okay, I'll only have 10, 20 people will immediately react and say we have to do something. So then it really goes out of hand. So I would say that the introduction of technology adds a new dimension of fear. But on the other hand, my original contention was that one of the, I would say, failures of Bangladesh's last 50 years was that we have not really gone to the people, door to door, literally, on the virtue of a secular outlook for Bangladesh rather than a religion-based politics. This we have not done. And I would say each, particularly during the military dictatorship, they otherwise, they had no base on the people. And therefore, they brought in obscurantist forces. Zia Rahman actually brought in people who opposed the birth of Bangladesh. Elements, religious elements who were opposed to the birth of Bangladesh. They were brought in to the political space just so that his base expands. Now, we have seen this in India and in Bangladesh in pre-partition days, that what you don't get in people's support, you try and bring it through religious, distortions, and thereby increase your vote bank, so to say. So yes, we are facing this challenge, but I think at least here I would like to say that Sheikh Hasina's government is quite firm. But what is lacking is that social engagement in which a whole massive social exchange takes place between people of the country, where the secular forces, the political forces, the pro-liberation forces really engages literally on a one-to-one basis on this issue of secularism and non-religion based outlook, non-extremist based outlook and politics.
One of the questions then will come about is that has the civil society failed in that sense?
I would say that civil society is much weaker than it has been in the past, and it is a part of that, if you like, democratic process, absence of which, and the part of demonizing. In fact, in Bangladesh, I'm sad to say that civil society has become like if not an abuse, but definitely not a compliment. Oh, he's a civil society member, which automatically means that he's up to something naughty or something, So not only have we lost space, but we also are in that sense, we have a huge struggle in front of us on that score.
Yeah.
If I may add something here, that India has been a source of inspiration not only in our liberation war support, but because of your continuous democracy, your literally since 1947 following of the constitution, regularity of the election, and everything. Also your media. So in many, many ways, India has been, if you like, a source of strength, inspiration for many of us in South Asia. I can definitely say for Bangladesh. But the changing of the nature of politics in India is also having an impact. And please don't underestimate that phenomenon, that the transformation of politics in India And your treatment of the media, your treatment of the civil society, your phenomena of demonizing the opposition, all of these directly or indirectly impacts on South Asia because of your stature, yeah, because of your history, because of your legacy of democracy.
Yeah, I think we would agree there. Taking up, you talked earlier about Sheikh Hasina, protecting secularism, etc., doing her best. In that context, is there tendency for greater, human rights violations? And in that context, the action by the United States just the other day, United States is no great, patron of human rights. But was that a signal saying that in trying to protect certain values, security forces are increasingly violating human rights? And is that something that we need to worry about?
I would say definitely so, and our paper has had a very strong stand on this. Obviously, the gradual, if you like, decrease of America as a symbol of anything, if you like, democracy or good governance or of corruption, America's, if you like, value is much diminished for many reasons. So when Americans say something, it doesn't really resonate that much as it used to do before. However, having said that, I would like to say very clearly that this is definitely a signal, and the extrajudicial killing in Bangladesh has been a phenomena that we in the press, and personally myself as an editor and my paper Daily Star, we have highlighted it. I think it is a clear and present danger. And what happens here is, which is sometimes not seen so clearly, that when the security force is in a way allowed, quote unquote, to take care of dissenting groups or views, very soon that force sometimes then uses it for their own specific interest. I mean, say X and Y are sanctioned as a political target, but A and B may become target because somebody within that force has a land dispute or some financial issues to settle, and the same process is used. And over time, how much of it is actually politically decision based and how much of it is institutional interest based, one is confused. And there the danger is even more serious. Not more serious, both are dangers, and we should not really have any excuse for it.
So one of the things we are proud of in India is that our army has been totally separated from this whole process. I think that Bangladesh didn't have the luxury throughout. How is it now?
Well, on the paper, army continuously says they are only disciplined force and they will remain within their own, domain. And Sheikh Hasina is a very powerful prime minister. And obviously the civilian rule will obviously be far superior to the army. But if you take it as a sociological phenomenon, if democracy weakens, if institutions of democracy do not function, if opposition is absent, if politics becomes corrupt, so if you have on one side all these, if you like, corrosive elements working on the side of democracy, then whether you like it or not, whether you say it or not, there is a redistribution of power somewhere. And intelligence agencies, their capacity, their ability to, if you like, go to the power and totally demolish or even a fictitious case about some important individual and try and prove that what is not true is true. these things are happening. I mean, let me give you one very interesting instance. This is all in the public domain. You can extrapolate from it. We had 4 or 5 days ago a state minister saying something horrible against Khaleda Zia's granddaughter, Khaleda Zia, her son, and their young granddaughter. He just went to the outer limits of vulgarity. Now, the Prime Minister asked him literally sacked him, asked him to resign immediately. Now, when he is in this state, suddenly a telephone conversation 2 years ago, where he was threatening an actress for similar purpose. I mean, he was asking her to come to his hotel room, and since she refused, he was giving her all sorts of threat, including saying that I'll have you picked up by the police and brought you to my hotel. Now, this conversation has suddenly become public, but this is 2 years old. So while we are very happy that this man is being exposed, we are also aware of the fact that his telephone was tapped 2 years ago. So, I mean, so this phenomena then exists. So if your private conversations are being put under surveillance, then it leads to all sorts of other questions, which are not the most healthiest trends in a democracy.
I think, Mr. Anam, you couldn't have been more frank and forthright. That's all. We thank you for that, and it's been a wonderful conversation we had with you. You mentioned in your conversation a little earlier that there is a need for a great open public debate. And yes, here I would like to say that Manthan is one of the platforms we have nurtured over the years, where it's still possible for us in India to have this open public debate and discuss issues of public interest. And we are very, very happy that you're here with us. There are a lot more questions, but we have to close here now. And we thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Mr.
And also we thank for the opportunity for us to celebrate the 50th year of Bangladesh. I'm sure.
Just if I may be allowed a concluding remark, is that, I mean, what I discussed primarily is how to improve our country. But the overarching narrative is what I began with when I said that whatever success we achieved, we are now in a mood to celebrate it so vehemently that I think we are subconsciously also in a mood not to hear anything critical. We have succeeded after so many years, and we have been looked down upon, and suddenly we are part of the global phenomena. Let us celebrate. And anything critical is in a way sort of set aside. We are in that sort of a mood. Not only the mood, but the fact that Bangladesh has succeeded. I mean, it's 55,000 square kilometers, very small country, 160 million people. I mean, the highest density in the world. And then not that much, natural and resources. We don't have oil, we don't have this or that. It is only human resource that we have. So for us to have forged through is something actually to celebrate. And I do so in Bangladesh, and I invite you to do so also. But we need to look at it also critically. And that's where, if you like, the media's role comes in, and that's why we are not very popular wherever we work. But anyway, thank you very much. I'm honored. I'm honored by this chance to speak to you both and to your audience and to the other members of your organization. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Mr. Anam. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, friends. And it's been a wonderful session. I wish we didn't have the limits of time in all these things, but all good things have to come to an end. We thank you very much for being here with us. Next week, we are having our own local leader, Kalpana Ramesh, who's going to talk to us on the challenge of water conservation. That's next Sunday at 10:30. Please do join us at that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Anam.
Thank you.
Yeah.